Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the Quantum Mechanics, the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everybody in between.
We've got a couple of new Patreons, right?
Yes, Inimatil and Max. Inimatil, I do hope that's how you say your name. I've practiced it a few times. If I've got that wrong, please tell me. But welcome, both of you. Thank you very much for joining us. Patreon.com/TQM pod.
Yes, early access, no ads, extra episodes, and lots of fine chat and other stuff going on. So thank you. How do I segue from that? Well, our Patreons just give us so much strength, don't they?
Very good, very good.
And we have all heard stories of people gaining superhuman strength when they or others are in danger. Normally around that, isn't it? So it's under extreme stress, people seem to perform these feats of unnatural power that seem unbelievable to us, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I wanted to delve into some of these stories and explore whether this is some kind of, I don't know, like what, momentary possession or channeling something from the universe? Or, yeah, is it a non-human strength? Or is it a natural process that can just kick in under certain situations? Because I'm a bit obsessed with that idea.
Like a non-human, you mean like channeling a third party?
Yes, channeling something from the universe. I did one in my research. I did come across something that said, "Oh, is this connected to quantum mechanics?" But there wasn't much detail. But you know, are they tapping into something in the universe? Are they being momentarily possessed, or is it just a natural thing?
Mm-hmm.
So, given the right conditions, could we all be superheroes?
Yeah, in a crisis scenario, I'm assuming this is when this comes about most of the time.
Yeah, because there is another name for this phenomena, which is called hysterical strength, which I'd not heard of before.
I
but I
like
like that phrase.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Now, when you think of a superhero with incredible strength, my go-to would be the Incredible Hulk.
Sure.
But did you know, Ben, that character was inspired by a real-life example of superhuman strength that was witnessed by the Hulk's creator, Jack Kirby?
I didn't. I would guess it would have been like influenced by some great sportsman, but no, so it's a supernatural occurrence, is it?
Yeah, in an interview for the Comics Journal, Jack Kirby explained where the inspiration for one of the most iconic comic book heroes came from. The Hulk I created when I saw a woman lift a car, Kirby says. Her baby was caught under the running board of this car. The little child was playing in the gutter, and he was crawling from the gutter onto the sidewalk under the running board of this car. He was playing in the gutter. His mother was horrified. She looked from the rear window of the car, and this woman in desperation lifted the rear end of the car. Suddenly came to me that in a desperation we can all do that. We can knock down walls, we can go berserk, which we do. You know what happens when you're in a rage? You can tear a house down. I created a character who did all that and called him the Hulk. Interesting that, isn't it? He said, I inserted him in a lot of stories, so I guess he made appearances in other comic strips before getting his own. Whatever the Hulk was at the beginning, I got from that incident. He goes on to say, a character to me can't be contrived. I don't like contrived characters. They have to have an element of truth. This woman proved to me that the ordinary person in desperate circumstances can transcend himself and do things that he wouldn't ordinarily do. I've done it myself. I've bent steel. Doesn't go into detail of how he bent steel, but he's done it himself. I think it's interesting when I think about stories of superhuman strength, the narrative of a distressed mother lifting a car feels like a cliche or something apocryphal, you know what I mean? But here we have this creator of one of the most iconic superheroes who did witness it for himself. I like that quote as well from Jack Kirby about when developing the Hulk, he didn't want it to be contrived. And you can see how witnessing that event of a mother saving her child by lifting up a car played into the narrative of the Hulk. Certainly, I mean, you're probably the same as me. We kind of grew up watching the TV version.
Yeah.
And you had Bruce Banner, this mild-mannered scientist who only transformed into the Hulk in times of extreme stress, danger, or injustice, really. There's also that theme of this super strength being somehow out of your control. impulsive, because the Hulk couldn't control how and when he turned into that creature, or from Banner into the Hulk. Well, these stories of mothers lifting cars are not apocryphal, as illustrated by this next case of Angela Carvalho and her son Tony. Now, Angela Carvalho was in her late 50s, back in 1982, living in Lawrenceville in Georgia. Her teenage son, Tony, had a 1964 Chevrolet Impala. Nice car.
That's a nice car.
I'd like that as my first car.
Yeah.
What was your first car?
A blue Metro.
Blue Metro, yeah.
What was yours?
A gold Datsun Cherry.
I wanted a Datsun Cherry.
I think Datsun Cherries looks all right when you're that age.
Didn't they have electric windows?
No, mine didn't.
Did not, no. My car barely had wheels. Had a choke, though, a manual choke.
I had a choke as well. Yeah. Oh, those were the days. Anyway, Chevrolet Impala, I would have thought, has a manual choke as well, but what a nice car to have. Anyway, her teenage son, Tony, was working on the suspension in their driveway, trying to knock something loose, it says. This knocking caused the car to fall off the jack before landing on top of the high school junior.
Dear.
As he lay unconscious under the vehicle, this was lucky, an 11-year-old called Johnny Edwards was in town visiting his grandparents, and he saw it happen. Quick thinking for an 11-year-old, he ran to the front door of the Carvalho's home and explained there'd been an accident. In a panic, Angela, the mother of the trapped boy, ran out to the vehicle and began attempting to lift the car while screaming for help. Now, a 1964 Impala weighs 3,295 pounds.
Whoa, is that like 3 tons? Is 1,000 pounds a ton?
It's, I think it's just nearly 2 tons.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, 1,495 kilograms. She put all her strength into lifting the rear of the vehicle to free her son. Unbelievably, she did this, Ben, while screaming and kicking her son to try and wake him up, because he was unconscious. So she's lifting the car, screaming and shouting, kicking her son, so he could try and free himself from under the wheel well, but he didn't wake up. Carvalho did, in fact, raise the car enough to release the pressure off her son, so he could at least breathe. Even more incredible, Ben, she held this car up for around 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
5 minutes. The 11-year-old boy who had alerted the mother was sent to collect neighbours to help, while she somehow kept the car from falling back onto her son. Finally, after around 5 minutes, 2 men came, slid the jack back under the Impala so Tony could safely be pulled from underneath.
That's a very, very long time. I wonder when she realised that was an extraordinary thing to do.
Well, she does actually talk about that. I'll come on to that. Tony, who was under the car, ended up only with scrapes and bruises and was able to leave hospital only after 2 days. In terms of Angela's incredible feat of strength, the mother, who was 5'8", said she recalls nothing about the incident.
That's interesting. That's a blackout.
Blackout. She believes she lifted the car about 4 inches off the ground, so, just over 10 centimetres, and held it for over 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Her only conclusion that this super strength must have come from a rush of adrenaline, so she wasn't seeing anything paranormal in it, but she couldn't remember the incident.
No, and I suppose a fright or flight type of response, it might make you not necessarily black out, but your senses perhaps are so engaged with other things and overwhelmed with adrenaline that you
and
wouldn't
your senses
take it
are
in.
just taking so much in. Maybe you kind of almost shut down your
But taking this, like when we were just talking about our first car, something that we probably had to do, and I certainly did, and lots of you may have done if you had a car in the 80s or 90s. You know when you get a flat battery because you've left the headlights on and you have to give it a push and then jump in and pump the clutch.
Yeah.
And that's the only way of getting it going. And a Metro weighs probably half what an Impala weighs.
Yeah.
That is hard to get that moving. So you probably need to get it up to like maybe 5 miles an hour or something to get that clutch going.
Yeah.
And I remember I was a much fitter, healthier man at 17. That was hard work. There's no way I'd have lifted that thing.
Well, for 5 minutes?
No, absolutely
and
not.
That's been confirmed because that's how long it took for the neighbours to get roused and kind of come and help put the jack back underneath. So,
God, imagine holding that whilst you're waiting for help.
Yeah, because you wouldn't know how long it was going to take, would you?
No. No wonder she's kicking and screaming it at him.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to feature a few other stories and then we can get into some of the science that might explain what is happening with this phenomena. Yeah, as I said, it's also called hysterical strength. But the next story involves not one, but 2 people showing extraordinary strength. In this case, 2 daughters managing to save their father's life. So Jeff Smith, a 36-year-old farmer from Oregon, was working on his farm trying to pull up a large tree stump by using his tractor. His boots were muddy, Ben. His foot slipped off the clutch, causing the tractor to lurch forward and flip over on top of him, pinning him beneath it.
Oh, no.
So he was struggling for breath under the weight of the nearly 1.5 tonne tractor, but he did manage to yell for help. And lucky for him, his cries were heard by his 2 daughters, Hannah, aged 16, and Hayley, who was 14, who were out walking the dogs at the time. So very lucky for him. Hearing their father's screams, they ran to the scene in under a minute. They initially tried to dig him out, but soon realised that this wouldn't work.
Good tactic, though. I can see where they're coming from.
Pretty smart, that, isn't it? Their father instructed them to try and lift the large piece of farm machinery. On the first attempt, his daughters only managed to lift the tractor for a few seconds, which at least helped their father regain his breath. On the daughters' second attempt, they managed to lift the tractor enough for their father to slide out from underneath it. Jeff escaped with only a broken wrist and bruising. Hayley pulled a muscle in the struggle. And I like this one. Hannah reported waking up feeling like an 80-year-old trying to get out of bed the next morning.
Well, okay, so that implies that there is... I mean, that feels a little bit like when you've done exercise that you haven't done before, unused muscles, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm hearing these stories thinking I still don't understand how that could not be something... When I say paranormal, I mean, not just of your own body.
Yes, literally superhuman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff understood the incredible feat of strength his daughter had managed, saying they saved my life. I've got a short clip from local news that was recorded at the time, interviewing those involved. Have a quick listen to this.
In the quiet country 15 miles east of Lebanon, people know how to take care of themselves. It's essential. Emergency medical care is a long ways off.
About 20 minutes, probably.
Which is why there was no room for error on Monday, April 1st, when Jeff Smith nearly went for the last ride of his life on his 1949 tractor.
I reached for the shifter, but my boots had a bunch of mud on it, and my foot slipped off the clutch, and it just walked that tractor straight over backwards on top of me.
He was pinned in the middle of his garden. His daughters were out walking their dogs, and with no one else around, he did the only thing he could. He screamed for help.
Which was scary because it was on my chest. Every time I called out for help, it's kind of like a constrictor. Every time I yelled out, I lost some of that. I could only get some of that back.
His daughters heard the cries and ran back to the house.
He was just laying in the dirt underneath the tractor, and he was just screaming, and he would not stop screaming.
They tried to dig him out, but they couldn't. So they grabbed onto the heavy iron machine weighing 3,000 pounds and lifted.
Do you remember what it was like? I mean, when you grabbed onto it, were you thinking anything?
This is really heavy, but I need to get it off of
him. I was saying, God help me, over and over, because I obviously could not lift it myself. It was heavy.
But not heavier than their desire to save their dad. They raised it just enough for him to slide out.
They're great girls, but that's a lot of weight just to think. Honestly, I don't know if I'm a big guy, and I don't know if I could do that.
8 days after it happened, 16-year-old Hannah and 14-year-old Hayley still struggled to explain how they did it. Maybe it's because they knew they had to rescue their father. They couldn't wait 20 minutes. And maybe it's because they didn't have time to wonder if it was possible.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I
can't believe we did it.
It's kind of like a dream when you think back. It just feels like a dream. It feels like it never happened.
So, Ben, I don't know if you noticed while we were listening to that, there was a little flag went up for me because it does say on the news report that the incident happened on April the 1st, which made me go, oh, is this some kind of joke? But it didn't get reported until a few days later. And certainly the people talking to me seemed very genuine. It's not the greatest April Fool joke ever, is it? So I think it is a genuine...
Yeah,
case.
I don't think that's an April Fool's joke, and also I don't think you'd report it on the news post the event interviewing people.
No, you wouldn't. Would you?
You'd only do it in the morning, and it would be about like a budgeriggar that can drive or something.
Well, it's one thing for two teenage women to lift a tractor, but can you imagine one person lifting an SUV that weighs over 1.5 tonnes, especially if that person is 72 years old?
No, I can't. All the vehicles in these stories weigh 1.5 tonnes.
Yeah, I think most of them in America. I think, probably older vehicles were a lot heavier, weren't they? Well, I guess now with batteries and stuff, they may be more, aren't they?
Maybe I don't have a good idea of it, because I would have said the car I drove in like a 4-door hatchback, I reckon that's about a tonne, probably.
Yeah. SUV, though, bigger.
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah.
Well, yes. So if you think this story sounds like a tall tale, you've never met Cecil Stuckless. What a great name.
I haven't.
The 72-year-old.
So what's he called, Stefan?
Cecil Stuckless.
Cecil Stuckless, he's 77.
72.
72, and he likes suckling on sausages.
Yeah. Well, in 2013, Frank Vatcher was replacing the brakes on a Jeep, and his father-in-law, Cecil Stuckless, was on hand to help. Frank asked Cecil to get a clamp he needed for the brakes, but while he was gone, the heavy SUV slipped off the jack, falling on Frank. Something about jacks, isn't there?
Yeah, you see, you wouldn't ever catch me going under a car. I even get the willies when they put the jack, you put your car onto one of those hydraulic jacks they climb underneath it, like like an inspection pit type of thing. I'm always thinking, I wouldn't trust that.
I hate driving onto those. You just think you're going to get it wrong, don't you? I think these days they don't let you do it, do they?
They don't let you do it, no. But they used to for when you had your tyres done.
Yeah.
You used to drive onto one of those things. You're right, I don't like it either, because I don't know what I thought, but yeah, it just feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's all a bit too Top Gear, isn't it? Top Gear Expedition.
Yes.
Well, father-in-law Cecil heard Frank's cries and came running back. The 72-year-old managed to lift the 1.5-tonne Jeep, which allowed Frank to free himself. The vehicle had landed on Frank with such force he needed 38 stitches in his head, but he did make a full recovery. Cecil became a hero in his Newfoundland town, where the pensioner earned the nickname Superman.
Excellent. Superman Cecil.
Yeah, modest Cecil just said, I just did what I could.
Well, I guess he did. And I guess he doesn't attribute it to anything other than, it was just luck.
Yeah, it was just natural for him.
Natural, yeah.
Well, this phenomenon doesn't just involve lifting heavy vehicles for trapped people, although it seems to mainly focus around that.
Yeah.
Some amazing cases of hysterical strength have been recorded where people have taken on some of the world's most dangerous animals, which leads me to the chilling tale involving Lindia Angio and her fight with a polar bear.
God. Was this like a staged thing?
No.
Like a Don King fight?
No. This is taken from the Globe and Mail, a newspaper in Canada. The reporter is Paul Waldy. There are a few names in this that I'm probably going to get wrong, so I do apologise. So Ms. Angio lives in Ivujevik. That sounds right, doesn't it?
Sounds right.
A village of 300 people on the shores of Hudson Bay in northern Quebec in Canada. On Wednesday evening, so this is what the report says, she was walking near the village community centre with her two sons when a group of children playing street hockey nearby started shouting and pointing frantically. Miss Angio, 41, turned around and saw a polar bear sizing up her 7-year-old son.
Oh dear.
She told the other children to run and raced around to get between the bear and her son. She then started kicking and punching the animal, according to police reports. In a flash, the bear swatted her in the face and she fell on her back. The bear then got on top of her and she began kicking her legs in a bicycle motion. She was swatted once more and rolled over, but the bear moved towards her again. Sisqua Luke Ani Alec heard the commotion and came rushing over. Seeing Ms. Angio wrestling with the bear, he ran to his brother's home, grabbed a rifle and headed back to the street. He fired a few warning shots. The sound diverted the bear's attention, but only temporarily. But it was long enough for him to aim again and fire. Unfortunately killing the bear, but there was no choice, I don't think. With the help of some neighbours, Angio made it to the home of Nelson Conn, a constable with the Catwick Regional Police Force. She came in a panic, Mr. Conn recalled in an interview. She was obviously in shock. All she was saying was, bear, bear. I just took her over to our nursing station and asked where and if the bear was dead, and she said yes. Remarkably, she only suffered a couple of scratches and a black eye. She and the local police had been fielding calls from across Canada ever since the incident was first reported on the news. I love this bit. Ms. Angio, who doesn't have a telephone, could not be reached. Meanwhile, villagers are still marvelling at her courage, and there is talk of nominating her for a Bravery Medal Award by the Governor-General. I guess because not only did she save her child, she saved the other kids playing. I've been here for 24 years and I've never seen this before, said Larry Hubbard, a regional captain with the police force who arrived on the scene. For sure, she saved the kids' lives, yeah. Mr. Hubbard has known Ms. Angio for 15 years and he can't believe she took on a bear. He said the bear measured 8 feet, so that's 2.4 metres in length, and weighed at least 700 pounds, so that's 318 kilograms or 50 stone. Miss Angio is about 4 foot nothing and 90 pounds on a wet day, Mr. Hubbard said with a laugh. She's pretty quiet. I'm surprised she went and did this, but I guess when your back is up against the wall, I guess we come up with superhuman strength. Ivujavik, in Quebec's northernmost community, situated on the peninsula where the Hudson Bay meets the Hudson Straits, while polar bears roam the giant ice packs that float just offshore, Mr. Hubbard said it's rare for them to wander into the village. He said he believes the bear that tangled with Miss Angio became disorientated and was not looking for food. He said she's lucky the bear wasn't hungry. If the bear was hungry, she would have been eaten pretty quickly. Kevin Ramsey-Turgeon, another police officer, said villagers might spot a bear near town once a year, but no one can recall a bear getting close enough to hurt anyone. Polar bear attacks anywhere are rare. About 2 years ago, a research student was pushed to the ground by a polar bear in Wapusk National Park, which runs along the shores of Hudson Bay near Churchill. A colleague managed to scare the bear off by hitting it with a piece of wood.
Bloody hell.
That's quite brave.
Yeah.
It was the first bear incident in more than 20 years in the park. The last fatal mauling in that area occurred in 1983. For Mr. Conn, the bear attack in Ivujavik was a wild welcome to the area. Originally from Ottawa, he had only been in the village about 4 months. I never thought I'd see something like that, he said. But I guess we are in the bear's territory, so it's something to be expected. Basically, just short of 5 foot, skinny, slim build mother taking on a 2.4 metre polar bear.
Yeah. That one is both luck and strength because, yes, if the mouth had been in the wrong place.
Yeah.
I wonder how this doesn't happen to everybody. You know, when you're in a situation like that, why can't you call on that strength?
Yeah, or whenever you want to. Well, let's get... Should we go on to some of the science?
Yeah.
So I read a few scientific papers on hysterical strength, but I'm going to heavily lean on a really well-written article from Adam Hadhazy for BBC Future, titled, How is it possible for an ordinary person to lift a car? Kind of does what it says on the tin. There's quite a lot in this article, so if you want to go and check it out, it's worth it. Try and read the whole thing. I'm just going to talk about a few points. Adam writes, in a handful of unusual cases, people have tapped into a normally inaccessible super strength, a hidden Hercules. It's a common urban legend. A mother lifts up a car to save her screaming child pinned underneath. And every now and then, this incredible feat of hysterical strength seems to really happen. Another couple one. I love the detail on this. In 2012, Lauren Kornacki, a 22-year-old woman in Glen Allen, Virginia, raised a BMW 525i.
How many options did it have?
yeah. Did it have the bucket seats or not?
Oh, yeah.
She lifted it off her father when he was trapped. When it toppled from a jack. There is a warning in this whole story, isn't there?
What? Oh, toppled from a jack. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
7 years earlier, a man named Tom Boyle hoisted a Chevy Camaro, which again I would have thought was pretty heavy,
That is a big car, yes.
freeing a trapped cyclist in Tucson, Arizona. I think that's interesting because it's not someone he knew. So you can do it. It doesn't have to be someone you know. The events don't always involve vehicles, so he mentions the one we just talked about, like in Lindia Angio went toe-to-toe with a polar bear in North Quebec to protect her son and his friends while they played hockey. Riveting as these accounts are, scientists have only a tentative understanding of what exactly might be behind hysterical strength. After all, the spontaneous life and death situations that apparently unleash it do not lend themselves to rigorous study, which is a really good point. You can't really design an experiment to do this in a lab and make people think that they're going to die, says E. Paul Zire, a professor of neuroscience at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada. Something has to happen by fluke. There is an interesting point, Ben, here that if this is purely a biological type reaction, it's hard to replicate a genuine feeling of death or peril for that subject in a scientific trial. I mean, how would you do it?
Yeah,
You
no,
can't.
I can understand. I can understand that. But, so does that mean then that everything is just an untested hypothesis?
Well, we've got some indicators, which I'm going to come on to. Because the article picks up on something I came across while looking into this phenomena. In my search for papers on the subject, I mainly came across research relating to elite athletes, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And the summary, basically, is that in some way, athletes manage to tap into this hysterical strength, especially when they're in competition. So if you take a weightlifter, outside of the physical development they've done, they also work on mental strength. They work on tapping into adrenaline. I mean, and also, if you think about it, if you're an Olympic athlete, winning a gold medal, though not quite a near-death experience, is certainly, at the time of the competition, probably the most important moment of your life, right?
Yeah.
Makes me think of that. What was that great quote from legendary Liverpool football manager Bill Shankly? He said, "Football isn't a matter of life and death. It's much more important than that." But if we continue with the weightlifter analogy, so the world record for a deadlift, so that is lifting the classic-looking bar with two weights at the end, but only to hip height. It's not lifting it above your head. The world record was set by Hafpor Julius Bjornsson in 2020 at 501 kilograms. So that's 1,104 pounds, about half a tonne.
Yeah, so about a third of what these cars weigh.
Yeah, I've got a nice bit of trivia about Bjornsson as well, the man who set the record. He's also an Icelandic actor who played the Mountain in Game of Thrones.
Oh,
Yeah, so he's holds the world record for a deadlift.
excellent.
But you're right, there's a big difference between a man who literally looks like a mountain lifting half a tonne to a mother lifting a car 3 times that weight, right?
yeah.
Now, the author of the BBC article also points out this. He says, could everyday folk really lift 3 times the world record? Probably not. Most reported hysterical strength examples describe a person lifting a portion of a vehicle several inches off the ground, but not the entire automobile.
Okay, yeah, that is a very good point, yes.
He said there's a catch. 3 of the vehicle's wheels, or maybe even all 4, depending on the suspension, remain on the ground, distributing the total weight of the vehicle. Furthermore, a vehicle's mass is not apportioned evenly. The heaviest part is the engine block, which is generally in the front centre. It's not at the periphery where the lifting often takes place.
Okay.
So put all that together, and not to take away from the courage of those who've managed to do this, but someone in a standard hysterical strength scenario is probably lifting more on the order of several hundred pounds, not an Incredible Hulk few thousand. Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating.
Yes, that is true, but I mean, that's still... They're still lifting a lot. The woman in that first example is still lifting a portion of a heavy car 4 or 5 minutes.
Yep.
And she's she's not an athlete, she's untrained.
That's true. We'll come on to a bit of that as well.
Okay.
But I think it's interesting, isn't it? If you take news outlets, they're going to go with the headline, aren't they? Mother lifts 1.5 ton car to save her child.
Yeah,
but in reality, they're not actually lifting the whole car. They're
Right.
not lifting the whole weight. However, they are still lifting, as you said, something that seems way beyond the capability of most of us mere mortals. Yeah, like you said, that woman lifting it for 5 minutes. Well, the article goes on to explain that we are all a lot stronger than we think we are. For the vast majority of us, who aren't natural beefcakes, such a huge deadlift...
Beefcake? I haven't heard that phrase in 10 years.
I think this is the article. Beefcakes. A huge deadlift is nothing to sneeze at. So how is hysterical strength even possible? One major clue is that we humans are quite simply stronger than we realise. Our movements are controlled by the contractions of muscles through signals relayed by nerves. When we're going about our daily lives, our bodies tend to use whatever the least amount is of muscle and nerve. It's called motor units. So we use the least amount of motor units to perform an action. Your muscles are normally activated in a very certain way that's really efficient, says E. Paul Zaya. So that's the professor of neuroscience I mentioned earlier. Why use the whole muscle mass to lift a cup of coffee? Good point. When we need to lug that couch up the stairs, we can simply recruit more motor units. Yet even when we feel we are at our limit, we are almost certainly not. Estimates vary, but researchers have pegged the amount of muscle mass recruited during maximum exercise at around 60%. And even elite athletes who have trained to get more output from their musculature might only harness around 80% of their theoretical strength. So why keep so much in reserve? The article goes on to ask. And it's really about safety. If we were going to exert our muscles to or beyond their absolute maximum, we could tear muscle tissue, ligaments, tendons, break bones, leaving us in a pretty bad way.
The person who said they woke up feeling like an 8-year-old.
Exactly, So our brains are always trying to make sure we don't get pushed too far to where we actually damage something, says there. If you actually used all the possible force or all the possible energy you could to complete exhaustion, you'd wind up getting into a situation where you might die. Pain and fatigue are semi-illusions. To truly disincentivize us from incapacitating ourselves, we've evolved to feel pain and distress during periods of high exertion. Experience of those feelings thus dissuades us from trying to move something that we judge to be too heavy, like a car.
Okay.
Though our muscles seem to be screaming out, stop, in many cases we could do more without incurring injury.
I don't know about you, every time my partner asks me to open the top of a jar, there are times there where I feel like literally I'm going to break my elbow.
It's all technique though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you put it under the hot tap, but whoever seals pickle jars, really, yeah. But I guess, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And I suppose that might account for the not blacking out, but the non-memory of it, because maybe it's a self-preservation thing.
Yeah.
It feels like there's maybe a third man effect here somewhere still.
Right.
But I mean, I'm not, as you know, I'm not a scientist, but...
Well, let's go to a little bit more, because what I found really interesting about this is that the science has actually changed quite a lot. So around 15 years ago, exercise science had chalked up muscle fatigue solely to physiological factors within the muscles themselves. So there was a Nobel Prize winner, A.V. Hill, who established this theory that the limiting factor in strenuous exercise was simply the body's ability to take in and disseminate energy, unlocking oxygen to the muscles. But this theory that it's all about muscles seemed to have been disproved. There is more going on, in the words of Timothy Noakes, an emeritus professor in the Division of Exercise Science and Sports Medicine at the University of Cape Town. He said, this brainless model has withered in recent years. Noakes' work and that of other researchers have reframed the brain as not a bystander, but as the central governor, with primary responsibility for performance. And per the new thinking, the pain of muscle fatigue is more an emotion than a reflection of the physical state of the extent of the muscle in question.
Okay.
So he says the takeaway is our brain, rather than our body, largely says when it's time to quit, based on psychology instead of physiology of oxygen-starved muscles. So your point that you made earlier of why can't everybody do this? I think we're going to get into a bit of that now. So this same guy says it's the psychology that allows athletes, and for that matter, hysterical strengthers, to overcome their brain's protestations to physical exertion. So training, which can be thought as frequent exposure to the psychological pain of effort, certainly helps in getting one accustomed to and pushing through the agony. I guess, Ben, this is like that thing you hear about with marathon runners. You know what they say about pushing through the wall? Your brain is, every part of your body in your brain is saying stop. But if you can push through that, you somehow tap into seemingly hidden reserves. And I guess that's how athletes, get to use, in high exertion, 80% of their potential strength rather than, us probably using 50 or 60 in the same position.
Right, okay.
But he does say there may be an underlying genetic component to the subjective feeling of pain. So some people have a harder time getting as close to their theoretical maximum output, says Zare. True elite athletes may have built-in advantage of being sociologically predisposed to superior performance. Either way, it's little surprise that in studies, highly trained athletes have reported higher pain thresholds than average people.
That all makes sense.
He says a hard-to-calculate but titanic factor behind hysterical strength is, of course, motivation. We can force ourselves to ignore some of those pain signals. As strong as the motivation might be for succeeding in an athletic context, the motivation can be arguably mightier for someone directly experiencing danger or empathising with another in harm's way. If you're in a situation where it's all risk and the reward is that you live, you are going to risk everything, says Zaya. There is no step up unless you do that. We always act with reserve, but that control can be overridden, agrees another expert from Cape Town, someone called Noakes. I'm aware of people doing remarkable feats in war when if they were caught, they would be killed. They have run for days without food or drink, which shouldn't seem possible. So the other key factor in this is adrenaline. So it's a hormone produced by the adrenaline glands, I'm sure we know this, that helps our body respond to stressful situations. And you mentioned it earlier, Ben, you have the fight or flight response.
Yeah.
So when we face danger, our brain signals the release of adrenaline, which increases our heart rate and breathing, pumps more blood to our muscles, boosts our energy levels. This rush makes us feel stronger, more alert, preparing us to react quickly. So the release of adrenaline is rapid, seemingly instantaneous, so that we can respond accordingly to our fight or flight situations, says Gordon Lynch, a physiologist at the University of Melbourne. Physiologically, adrenaline boosts breathing and heart rate, flooding our muscles with extra oxygenated blood for more forceful contractions. Nerves from the spinal cord running to our body's muscles are more easily able to recruit motor units, again harnessing more of the muscle's total strength. The more motor units that are recruited, the greater force that can be developed, says Lynch. Furthermore, during stressful, adrenaline-fueled situations, this is interesting, the body's pain sensitivity seems to fall, as suggested by numerous anecdotes of injuries incurred and only later fathomed. So a bit like the girl who was like, I woke up the next day and realised, I felt like an old woman, or I've sprained my shoulder.
My arm had fallen off. Yeah.
Here's an example, actually. There was a writer called Jeff Wise. He had got home after lifting a car off a teenager. So this is an Arizona man. He felt pain in his mouth afterwards, and he turned out he'd unknowingly cracked 8 of his teeth
No.
by clenching his jaw so tightly during the lift. But he didn't notice this until we got home, and I guess the adrenaline had passed. So he didn't feel anything, but until we got home, and then he's like, I've just broken 8 of my teeth.
Oh, I've had a cracked tooth. It's horrible. It is horrible. That adrenaline thing, by the way, you can... This might be obvious to people, but it was... my vet explained it. You know when your dog runs to the door when, like, the postman comes or something?
Yeah.
And then immediately go. Then the dog, my dog at least, comes back into the room and then picks up a toy and has to try and kill the toy or wants to play with
right,
it. Because it's got
up.
the adrenaline and it's
Yeah.
fired up and it needs to burn it off. Yeah. It never occurred to me. But
Well, sometimes these signs of superhuman strength can be reported in connection with people taking certain drugs, like methamphetamine.
oh, yeah. I was going to ask about that. I've heard.
Yeah, cocaine, PCP.
Yeah, PCP. That's the classic one, isn't it?
Yeah, this gives you a similar resistance to pain, and additional strength is reported by police when dealing with people who've taken these type of drugs. So in certain situations,
Right.
pretty high. If somebody's on those drugs, it's like they don't want to tackle them because their pain threshold has gone away, and they're hyped up, they're irrational, and they've got so much adrenaline pumping around their body. But if we go back to that point that was made earlier, that it's hard to recruit a true risk of death situation or recreate it in a lab. But there are some research studies that have looked into the potential that adrenaline can have. I think this is I wouldn't be pleased if I'd taken part in this study. In a study from 1961, Michio Ikiya at the University of Tokyo and Arthur Steinhaus of George Williams College investigated how subjects' grip strength changed given certain provocations. So what Ike did is he would creep up behind the person in the study and fire a starter pistol by their head.
Is that ethical?
It reminds me, actually, in The Exorcist, there's that famous scene where one of the priests, I think he's working away on typewriter or something, and he turns quickly and looks panicked. And it's really quite a compelling scene. But that's what the director did. He walks up behind him with a gun and fired it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Very Hitchcockian directorship.
Yeah. Well, anyway, after they fired this gun, the strength, so this is measuring their grip, after that incident, their strength went up dramatically. They also got participants to shout or grunt loudly. That increased their strength by 15%. Which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You know, when you see weightlifters making that kind of noises, that can raise your strength by 15%. This is interesting. When they tried hypnosis, strength increased by an incredible 30%.
Interesting.
So, the brain has huge amount to play in this. Should we do a bit of conclusion and summary?
Yeah.
So firstly...
there's literally nothing paranormal going on here at all?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I couldn't find any kind of connection. I did so... Like I said, I found some loose mention of quantum mechanics, but there was nothing. It was like a Reddit thing. There was nothing to back it up.
Because I keep thinking of, like, the Jekyll and Hyde type of thing. Now, I know in the book, obviously, that's caused by a potion. It's also an allegory for, like, bipolar disorder and similar things. But the way that it is reported, there are people who are reported to be like a Jekyll and Hyde, and in one instance, they have completely different physical characteristics to the other self, and that does include, in some cases, strength.
Yeah.
And that is, in that situation, there has been an idea that perhaps there's like a possession or something going on there. But actually, there doesn't need to be then. The way you're describing it there, it could just be because the brain is rerouting something a different way, and therefore your resistance to, like, the pain from the muscles or whatever has changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember which one was Jekyll and which one was Hyde. But in the more aggressive version, that person could be tapping into double their normal strength. You know what I mean? If their brain was working in a different way in that thing. So, research is difficult to quantify. So there is that kind of open bit. it's pretty much impossible to recreate that true fear and peril that drives this hysterical strength response in the lab. So again, those stories of people lifting 1.5 ton cars to save someone, yeah, technically the vehicle weighs that much, but that isn't what is being lifted. We humans only use a small proportion of our strength in everyday life situations because, well, I guess why would we need to use more? Why risk exhaustion, injury, or even death? As they said earlier, to lift a cup of coffee.
Unless you got one of those Sports Direct mugs.
Yeah, you might need that, those giant ones. Yeah. Yeah, you might need to tap into a little bit more there. Adrenaline and the psychological process involved in these life or death situations can release hidden strengths that people had no idea they had. I think it's worth pointing out that, there may be a predisposition to it, that, the kind of situations described that trigger a fight or flight response, I'm not sure everyone would react the same in that situation. You'd like to think you would, but some people might run away, some people might freeze rather than act. An example like the ones we featured, people reacted without thinking, likely due to the amount of adrenaline pumping around their bodies. But I guess everyone will react differently.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not sure whether there is anything paranormal with a big P about these stories, but I have to say I'm in awe of what the human body and mind can achieve when put under extreme pressure. It's just amazing.
Yeah, sometimes like in McDonald's and I'm like, should I have the burger or the fillet of fish? And I go for both, and I just don't know how I managed to...
Do you manage to lift them both at the same time?
To lift them both at the same time. But you see, one of the fascinating cases that I really like is, there are some specifics, but it's a general one as well, where police officers are called to a person who is doing something uncontrollable.
Yeah.
And they say, it takes 4 or 5 officers to hold them down.
Yeah.
And quite often, then it's reported like, the assumption was they were under PCP. That was the one I was still talking about, or drugs. But then there were other ones. There was a story that I heard maybe 2 years ago, and I'm pretty sure it was from another podcast. I'm not claiming ownership on this, but the story goes something like 2 police officers are called because there's a man behaving oddly underneath a bridge, and it's been phoned in by a member of the public. This is obviously, not obviously, but this does happen in America. Then these 2 police officers arrive. They can't see anything, and then they see this humanoid figure who is behaving very strangely under the bridge. He's completely naked and growling and appears to have something in his mouth, almost like he's a wild animal.
Right.
They decide that they will go down and arrest him, but he turns on them and they draw their gun. They don't want to shoot, but they draw their gun, and he doesn't take any notice of the gun being drawn and carries on. And they kind of restrain him. They ask for backup. Backup comes, but also comes an ambulance. He is then, this man with the force of 4 people plus the 2 ambulance people, is strapped to a gurney, and he appears to be almost breaking the straps on the gurney. He's arching his back, goes into the back of the ambulance. And then the weird thing about that tale is that the police officer who tries to complete the report finds out that the highway patrol people that turn up to help them, they weren't registered. The ambulance registration number also doesn't come up, and they can't get any notes back from the hospital. So there's obviously a kind of, was it an experiment gone wrong or something? Right. But if you take that paranormal side out of it, which is the thing that makes me sort of remember it and the intrigue, it would be possible then for that person to exhibit that sort of strength consistently if they were in that changed mental state, according hysterical to what that hysterical strength. Right. Yeah. Okay.
It did make me wonder. It was a long time ago, but we did an episode that was on zombies and preparing for the zombie apocalypse.
Yes.
You had some stories of those kind of, reminds me of those kind of zombie encounter reports. Again, it could be somebody either drug related or not, but just almost in that hysterical strength state, because that wouldn't get reported as a hysterical strength story, would it? The narrative of those stories is pretty much mother lifts car to save baby, or someone lifts car,
that's
or
right.
Fights off polar bear. You wouldn't go, oh, there was a man who took on 5 cops in who was off his head. You wouldn't kind of get that reported in that way.
You wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. No. I mean, have you ever come across a situation yourself where you've sort of done something you didn't imagine you could?
No, I've never been in that kind of life or death situation. Yeah.
There's only one time I can remember where, those extendable dog leads.
Yeah.
I was in a situation where my dog was there was a cat on the other side of the road, and basically my dog was going mad, and I sort of fumbled the handle of the dog lead, but the cord was wrapped around my index finger. It was incredibly painful, but I managed to hold him from going across the other side of the road and haul him back with a single finger. Now, that is in no way the same as picking up a Chevrolet Impala.
Yeah. Well, I've had that thing of, you've injured yourself, but you don't feel the pain until a few moments afterwards. We always used to say that with the kids when they were young. You always knew it was a bad fall because the crying... How long the gap was between the fall and the crying would kind of tell you how painful it had been.
Yeah, the immediate silence.
If it was a long gap, then you knew it was going to be, here it comes, So, there's got to be it has to be, again, it's the incredibleness of the human body. That's to protect you, right? If you were screaming in pain, you wouldn't be able to get through pulling your dog back or, working out if you were okay if you fell over. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it gives you that moment of logic, doesn't it? To kind of go, what's going on here? Yeah,
it does. Or try and get yourself out of the immediate danger so that no more bad things happen to you. Yeah. So it does make me I'm now sort of running through all of the paranormal cases in my head that relate to this, and I'm sort of thinking,
that's interesting.
Well, I wonder whether something like Spring Heel Jack might be a sign to this, because there's a I can't remember what it's called because I'm sort of doing all this thinking on the fly. I haven't done any research on it, but there's a condition where you don't feel pain, isn't there?
Yes, yeah.
And I wonder whether somebody like that could exploit that, and perform seemingly inhuman feats, because they're combining a workout strength and a level of personal strength with this inability to feel pain, and therefore they can do things that appear superhuman, supernatural.
Well, it's interesting, of course, Spring Heel Jack time, there wouldn't have been, any sports scientists around, but it's interesting that they believe that well-trained athletes can tap into 80% of their strength. That is a lot.
It is a lot.
You know what I mean? That is a lot. So, and back in the day of something like Spring Heel Jack, maybe inadvertently or subconsciously someone worked out how to tap into that, and it would feel incredible, wouldn't it? And then of course some of the stories would have been exaggerated. He jumped over a 15-foot wall. Well, it was maybe a 6-foot wall. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
Or maybe he just scrambled up it.
Yeah.
That's the I think of all of the paranormal things we cover, Spring Heel Jack is definitely in the top 10 of things that make me go, I wonder.
Well, there's those weird kind of sub-stories of being spotted outside of houses, and there's all kind of, there is an intriguing story that, yeah, worth going and checking out. That episode was a while ago now we did that, didn't we? But it's a good story.
Yeah. Not as good as your belly button monster from a couple of weeks ago.
I can't remember what it was called, but there's something handy. There's a bit of handy, yeah. Good.
Well, thank you very much. You would deliver that with superhuman dexterity of mouth.
Thank you. I was only going at 60%.
Yeah. Well, most of us are.
All right.
Well, yes, and I think it'd be great if anybody out there listening has got any tales, because I reckon there'll be some family ones. There'll be I know of one, and I'm not going to tell their story, but it involves a swimming pool and dragging a kid out of a swimming pool. I know that might be an instance of that, because I know that particular person has no idea how they did it.
Oh, it's funny you say. I have got one of that, a friend's young child, kind of toddler, kind of in between baby and toddler, fell into a pool. And it wasn't superhuman strength, and I got her out. But it struck me how quickly I reacted. It was almost like I'd had the kid out of the pool before I'd realised what was going on. So maybe that is a little bit of the kind of phenomena we're talking about.
But that speed of reaction sometimes, like, do you ever do that when you're driving, and it's only after you've swerved something that you go, flipping heck, I nearly hit that, and I don't know how I did it.
Yeah.
That always amazes me. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, that happened to me two times ago when I was coming back from here. Something ran into the road, a deer it was. And I just sort of flipped. It's a good job modern cars have got that stability control.
Yeah.
I flipped around it, and then it was only afterwards my brain caught up and went, that was a deer, but I did it. Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? The human body is weird.
It is weird. Well, we will be back next week with more quantum mechanicsness. Thank you for listening. Hope you got something superhuman out of today's episode.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Patreon.com/TQMpod. See you there. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?